Aloha mai kako e nā hoa makamaka mai ka la hiki a ka la kau. Velina nui me ke aloha. Mahalo nui no ke a koko ano o kako no ka pono o ka la hui. No ka pono o ka aina me ka pono o ka vai no hoi. Ea he o lelo no e ao e kalele ana I ke ko'i o ka vai a me ka aina ke kahi. Hanau ka aina, hanau ke ali'i, hanau ke kanaka. Born was the land, born were the chiefs, born were the common people. Just wanted to take a second this afternoon to thank all the dads and granddads in the room who celebrated Father's Day yesterday, and to remind everybody that the good work that the fathers do in day in and day out life not only affect your families in a positive way, but the place we call home, Hawaii. So thank you, and happy Father's Day to everyone. Welcome to today's June 22nd, 2026 regular meeting of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Before beginning today's meeting, I'd like to state that our board is dedicated to providing safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future. At this time, we would like to share a brief recording with reminders on public participation as well as virtual meeting regulations for the board members as required by law.
Materials for this meeting under HRS Section 92-7.5 are accessible at boardofwatersupply.com/boardmeetings. The public may attend this meeting in person at the BWS Public Service Building, located at 630 South Beretania Street. The public may also view a live stream of today's meeting on our website at boardofwatersupply.com/live. We have been accepting written or oral testimony for today's meeting. Instructions and an online submittal form are available at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. The deadline to submit advance written testimony has passed. Testimony received by noon today have been distributed to the board members. We will continue to accept written testimony today through our online form. Oral testimony in person or remotely will be accepted during today's meeting. To facilitate as much in-person and remote testimony as reasonably possible during the time allotted, pre-registration and submittal of a written version of testimony at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony is strongly encouraged. To testify in person, please register using our online form or come to the Public Service Building at 630 South Beretania Street. We have a representative in the lobby to provide intake and further instructions. To request to testify remotely, please complete the online form at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. Requesters will receive an email containing links and instructions to join the Zoom session. Testifiers will have 2 minutes to state their position. A timekeeper will alert testifiers when there is 1 minute remaining. Once the 2 minutes are up, please summarize to allow time for questions from the board. Then, make room for the next testifier. Board members attending any board meeting remotely must be visible to the public to be considered present and meet quorum guidelines. Board members participating remotely must also disclose their location and anyone present at their location during roll call. Meeting participants who are calling or video conferencing in, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If you have a question, comment, or wish to enter or second a motion on an action item, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself before continuing to speak. If you encounter technical issues during today's meeting, please use the Zoom chat to send a direct message to our support team. Their names are listed in the message to all participants. To open the chat window, please click on the text bubble icon on the Zoom toolbar.
All right, thank you. Let's take a moment to take a roll call of the board members. When I call your name, please say aye, and if attending remotely, make the appropriate disclosures. I'll start with myself. I'm in my hotel room by myself. And I appreciate everybody's patience with me running the meeting remotely. I try to, as much as possible, do this in person, but this meeting we couldn't help. Also attending virtually is Jean Albano.
I'm also in my hotel room alone.
Aloha, thanks for joining, Jean. In the boardroom today, we have Vice Chair John Kanashiro.
Hi.
Aloha. Board Member Lance Wilhelm.
Hail.
Aloha. Board Member Jeffrey Lapola.
Hi.
Aloha, Jeff. Board Member Darian Chun.
Aye.
Okay, aloha. And then Board Member Edwin Sniffen is excused for today's meeting and absent. Also in the room today, Deputy Manager Erwin Kawata.
Here.
Aloha. Board Secretary Joy Cruz, that's you.
Here.
Aloha. Joy is also has free reign to keep us on track today. If I make a mistake, Joy, just call it out. Thank you. Manager
Thank-
Secretary Kim Kwai.
Yes.
Information Specialist Wayne Maria.
Here.
And it looks as though both, oh, and we have Jeff Lau in the room with us today. Hello, Jeff. And then joining via Zoom, Manager Ernie Lau.
Aloha.
Aloha, Ernie. And Jessica Wong from City and County Corp Council is also joining us via Zoom. Aloha.
Hello.
Okay, so for today, we have 5 action items. We'll start with item number 1, approval of the minutes of the public hearing and regular meeting held on May 26, 2026. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move. Second.
And seconded. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair Jonathan Kaneshiro,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Williams,
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Lopolo,
Aye.
Board Member Jerry Chan,
Aye.
Board Member Gino Bono, and Chair Nale Wesley.
Aye.
Chair, motion passes with 6 ayes.
Okay, thank you so much. Please note for the record. We're moving on to item number 2, election of the chair and vice chair of the Board of Water Supply beginning July 1st, 2026. Chair recognizes Ernie Lau.
Aloha, board members and chair and board members. I'm kind of in a support role. Erwin Kawata's in the room, but every year it's the duty of the board to elect a new chair and vice chair each year. And this is time for the election to take effect July 1st, 2026. I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion, folks?
Chair, Lance Wilhelm here, if I could be so indulged. There's been, we've had a couple of conversations in executive session about the future of the Board of Water Supply and our interest in being supportive in the long term, particularly as we move into this next season. I suggested at such times that I would be humbled to submit my name as a potential chairperson. And I would like to make that suggestion at this time. I do believe our vice chair served ably in that position, and I would suggest that that might continue going forward. And that yourself, as you come back and serve in the focus of the Red Hill area, could be an important role for you to play as well. And but we can solve that in the future. But for the time being, for the election of chair and vice chair, if it so pleases, I would like to make a motion for the election of myself as chair and John as vice chair.
Okay, awesome. John, you okay with staying on as vice chair?
Yeah, I'll be honored to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think it's really important that we have young leadership coming up at the Board of Water Supply. So I'm encouraged at your willingness to stay on as vice chair. Okay, so the motion on the table is to have Lance be the chair and John to stay on as the vice chair. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Kaneshiro,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Williams,
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Lopolo,
Aye.
Board Member Jerry Chan,
Aye.
Board Member Gino Bono.
Aye.
And Chair Nalehu Anthony.
Aye.
Chair, motion passes with 6 ayes.
Okay, awesome. Hey, just a note, congratulations to you both, and thank you both for your leadership here at the board. There's a number of important things that we have to discuss as we go, but I just want to thank everyone for their commitment. I mean, these are laborious jobs, and the pay seems to be just getting lower and lower every year. So I want to thank everybody for coming on and supporting local government. Thank you, folks.
And thank you for your service as well. Love it.
Thank you, Leo.
Okay, please note for the record, the 6 ayes.
Thank you.
Moving on, thank you. Moving on to item number 3, adoption of resolution number 1014, 2026, acceptance of the gift to the Board of Water Supply from Hawaiian Earth Recycling LLC in support of the 2026 annual Halawa Xeriscape Garden Unthirsty Plant Sale. Chair recognizes Sherry Mikami. Aloha.
Aloha and good afternoon, Board Chair and members. We recommend the adoption of Resolution 1014.2026, acceptance of the gift from Hawaiian Earth Recycling in support of our 2026 annual Halawa Xeriscape Garden Plant Sale on Saturday, August 1st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The amount of the donation is $1,963.35. The Board of BWS's annual Halawa Xeriscape Garden Unthirsty Plant Sale is a well-established, successful public outreach program. It educates Oahu residents about the importance of outdoor water conservation and sustainable gardens. Studies show that more than 30% of residential water use occurs outdoors, so it makes sense for the BWS to promote water-saving methods in this area, which in turn can reduce the customer's combined water and wastewater bill. This donation from Hawaiian Earth Recycling LLC allows BWS to give free compost to our plant sale visitors and encourage them to incorporate into their own home gardens some of the techniques they learned at the event. So we deeply appreciate the continued support of this board for this very valuable and worthwhile public outreach program. Plant sale attendees are encouraged to use this information we provide at the event to become better stewards of our precious water resource. I am available for any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Sherry. Members, any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
As a regular visitor to the plant sale, I will enthusiastically make a motion to accept the gift.
Thank you so much. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Kanashiro,
Abstain.
Board Member Lance Bohem,
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Laupula,
Aye.
Board Member Jerry Chan,
Aye.
Board Member Gina Bono, and Chair Nalehu Anthony.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair. Motion passes with 5 ayes and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you so much. Please note for the record, and just a huge mahalo for Hawaiian Earth Recycling for supporting the Xeriscape Garden plant sale. We appreciate the gift. Okay, moving on to item number 4. Adoption of resolution number 1015, 2026, amending state revolving fund water system revenue loan. Resolution number 741, 2004. Chair recognizes Leanne Matsumoto and Darian Hodge of PFM. Aloha.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and members. We recommend adoption of Resolution 1015, 2026, amending the State Revolving Fund SRF Water System Revenue Loan Resolution number 741, 2004, that was adopted on February 23rd, 2004, which generally authorized the board to enter into SRF loan agreements with the State of Hawaii Department of Health The board has been in negotiations with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, acting by and through the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, the Whitfield lender, and Bank of America, the bank, to obtain loans to finance capital improvements to the Kailailoa seawater desalination facility project. Such loans are to be secured on a parity basis with the loans obtained from the Department of Health from time to time under Resolution number 741, 2004. As from time to time amended and supplemented as permitted thereby. In the course of these negotiations, the board has determined that it would be advantageous to the board to amend certain provisions of the SRF resolution to exclude certain principal payments in the calculations of debt service in the connection with any loans obtained from the Department of Health, the Whitfield lender, or the bank. I'd like to present Darren Hodge from PFM, our consultant, who will have a presentation to further explain.
Good afternoon, board. And the presentation be shared on screen. Perfect. So if we can turn to slide 2, as Leanne mentioned, what we want to talk about today is our existing subordinate lien legal documents have a treatment and a definition of debt service that we're looking to bring up to speed with current market standards. And in particular, it's going to relate to certain types of debt obligations that we can enter into, which are more what we call interim financing obligations. In other words, they're debt obligations that we don't intend to leave outstanding forever. We enter into them for an interim period of time with the intent that we will refund them with longer term debt in the future. And so the current definition of debt service in our loans essentially takes these interim obligations and treats them as a single payment of debt service upon their expiration. And so as we'll show on one of the next slides, this can create some problems because even though they're due on a single point in time in the future, it's never our intent to pay them off on that date. Our intent is to take them out with debt and repay them over a longer period of time. So if we turn to slide 3, what we've done here is we've tried to illustrate exactly under the existing legal documents how this would be treated, this situation we're describing. So on the left here, we have our existing senior lien debt service through 2030. And as you can see, it's about $31 million a year. Next to that, we have our existing subordinate lien debt service, and it's roughly $10.5 million a year. And then what we're showing on the next column is our interim financing, which we'll talk about in a later item. But under the existing documents, if we take out a $50 million interim financing that is due, its expiration in 2029, we would be forced to treat in 2029 as if we had a $50 million principal payment coming due, even though the intent is to not pay that off with cash in that year with revenues. Instead, the intent is to pay that off with long-term bonds. And so what you can see on the far right is the debt service that would be calculated under our existing legal documents for purposes of our rate covenant and our additional bonds test. And so you can see there in 2029, our debt service jumps up very dramatically because of the way that it's treated in the existing legal documents. And so if we turn to slide 4, what this amendment is designed to do is to smooth out that debt service upon the expiration of that interim financing obligation to be more consistent with how we will actually pay it off in the future. And so within these amendments, we've incorporated 2 concepts that are pretty standard in today's market. The first is the definition of the concept of excluded principal and assumed debt service. What excluded principal allows us to do is to take a debt obligation like a revolving line of credit or a short-term note and say, we are going to take that obligation and instead of treating it as due in a single point in time when calculating debt service, we're going to instead calculate it as assumed debt service, meaning we're going to amortize that payment over a 40-year period of time, i.e. more consistent with how we will actually pay it off. So what does this allow for? It essentially allows us more flexibility so that when we're calculating rates every year, we're not having to take into account the single bullet maturity in the near term. that would potentially result in us needing to increase rates, even though the intent is to never pay that off in that single year. So if we turn to slide 5, what we show here is that same example previously, but under the new definition. And so what I want to focus on there is that column interim financing. You can tell here that the debt service is now levelized, and we don't have that huge spike in 2029. And that's because of the new definition of excluded principal and assumed debt service. And so if we flip to slide 6, what we show here is the comparison. So the left-hand column is debt service as it would be calculated under existing legal documents. The middle column is how debt service would be calculated after the amendment if it's approved today. And on the right, you can see the difference in how debt service changes in the two definitions. And so obviously in 2029, that's the largest material difference. The debt service obviously being about $49 million lower, which benefits us from a rate covenant and additional bonds test standpoint. And so with that, I'll pause and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today and helping us through this. Members, are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Lehu. How does Moody's or S&P view of like definition changes when they, provide a rating?
Great question. So when Moody's and S&P look at these definitions, what they're really looking for is a couple of things. The first is, as long as you have strong credit fundamentals, like BWS does, they're less concerned. But also because this provision is pretty common in today's market, they've seen this quite a bit before. And so there's not really concern from their perspective. So I would say that when we show this to them, there won't be a concern.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Darren. Any other questions?
Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Kanashiro,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Wilhelm,
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Lafona,
Aye.
Board Member Darian Chad,
Aye.
Board Member Gina Albano, and Chair Nolly Lansme.
Aye,
Chair motion passes with 6 ayes.
thank you. Please note for the record, and Leanne, please try not to spend it all in one place. Okay, item for requiring board action number 5, adoption of the revolving line of credit projects water system revenue loan resolution number 1016 2026. In the line of credit projects water system revenue loan series 2026 resolution number 1017 2026. Chair welcomes back Leanne Matsumoto and Darian Hodge of PFM, and it looks like I was wrong, and they are going to spend it all in one place.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. We recommend adoption of the following 2 resolutions. The revolving line of credit projects water system revenue loan resolution number 1016 2026. The revolving line of credit general resolution. And number 2, the line of credit projects water system revenue loan series 2026, number 1017 2026, authorizing up to 50 million aggregate principal amount outstanding at any one time of the board's revolving line of credit projects water system revenue loan series 2026. After more than several months of negotiations with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, acting by and through the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, the WIFIA lender, the board has determined to enter into a revolving credit agreement to be dated on or about July 7, 2026 with the Bank of America to finance capital improvements relating to the Kaleloa Seawater Desalination Facility project on an interim basis, as well as other approved capital projects of the system. The bank has agreed to take a junior and subordinate security for the repayment of loans. It will made from time to time to the board. The revolving line of credit general resolution will pledge the net revenues of water system as security for the payment of the debt service on the revolving line of credit loans, except that such pledge for revolving line of credit loans will be subject to and subordinate to the pledge made or to be in resolutions, including resolution number 717, 2001, adopted April 26, 2001, for bonds issued or to be issued under and pursuant to such resolutions. That's the senior debt. As more fully described below, as well as parity to the pledge made to the State Department of Health under Resolution 741, 2004, adopted by the board on February 23rd, 2004, as from time to time amended and supplemented as permitted thereby. Each revolving line of credit or series of revolving line of credit loans will be made pursuant to the agreement. I'd like to again introduce Darren Hodge, who will have a presentation to explain the revolving line of credit that we are considering.
Good afternoon again, board. All right, so if we turn to slide 2, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the details of the revolving line of credit. So as Leanne mentioned, we're anticipating the facility size to be approximately $50 million. The security for repayment of any draws in the facility will be net revenues of the water system on the subordinate lien. And the subordinate lien is the same lien that we are anticipating the potential WIFIA loan being placed on as well. Now, the purpose for the revolving line of credit, or what we can use these draws for, is multi-purpose. So the first and primary reason is to help provide interim financing during construction for the desal facility. But in addition, we have the flexibility, should we choose, to use it for other eligible projects, capital projects as necessary. Now, for the tax status, what we've done is we've incorporated flexibility to make both tax exempt and taxable draws in the facility. That's to give ourselves flexibility and make sure that we can draw at the lowest possible cost. In terms of when we're anticipating closing, if approved today, we'd be looking to close, it says July 7th here. We've since pushed that back to July 8th. And then what we're anticipating is this would be a 3-year facility. So it would expire around July 6th of 2029. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect. In terms of the pricing, so the interest that we pay on this facility, there's 2 different costs that I want to talk about. The first is what we call the commitment or the undrawn fee. What this fee represents is it's just a fee that you pay on the amounts you haven't drawn the facility. Think about it as an availability fee to have the line of credit available so that you can draw on it. That fee is 28 basis points on the undrawn amounts. And what undrawn means is that currently, if you didn't have any outstanding draws in the facility, it'd be $50 million. If we draw half the facility, the undrawn amount would be $25 million. The second fee is going to be our drawn rate. And the drawn rate is comprised of 2 different factors. Well, 3 different, actually. You have the factor, you have SOFR, which we'll talk about just a second, plus a margin, a credit cost. And at today's rates today's ratings we have are AAA ratings. Tax exempt draws, we have an example here of what it would be calculated at. We would take daily SOFR. SOFR is essentially an overnight taxable rate that is tracked across the markets, used by corporations, municipalities. It's accepted by the feds. And we would take a factor of 80%. That 80% is meant to estimate what the tax exempt equivalent would be given SOFR as a taxable rate. And then we add a credit spread to that. And the credit spread is 65 basis points. So based off current market conditions, what that means is that if we did a draw today, we'd be paying a rate of about 3.58%. What I've done below that is we've shown a taxable rate. The primary difference is that with the taxable rate, there is no 80% factor because it's not a tax exempt draw, it's taxable. So we're taking the full SOFR rate. In addition, there's a slightly wider credit spread of 92 basis points. So all in all, what this means is that if we're to draw taxable, our interest rate would be about a full % higher than if we're able to draw tax exempt. Turning to the next slide, on slide 4, what I wanted to show here is just a history of SOFR rates. So again, SOFR is an overnight taxable rate that's used across the finance sector. And so as you can see, it for the most part tracks the federal funds rate pretty closely. And so over the last 12 months or so, there's been a slight decline, and currently we're about 3.75%. Now, what would this look like going forward? It's, my crystal ball's kind of muddy and fuzzy these days, but one good barometer is to look and say, what might the Fed do? And so recently there's been discussion, I think most of the market currently anticipates that there probably won't be any Fed cuts this year, but there could potentially be some Fed hikes. And there's a pretty high probability, last I checked, that the first hike might happen in September of this year. So to the extent we do see a 25 basis point hike in September, what this would result in is that SOFR would probably increase from about 3.75 up to about 4%. Next slide, on slide 5, please. So now I want to go through some of the benefits and the considerations of this revolving line of credit. I'll start with the benefits. Why do we want to do this? So the main benefit is that right now, again, the interim financing or the revolving line of credit is interim financing for the desal project during construction. And when you look at the alternative of what we would be looking to pay for the project with on the borrowing side, we'd be looking at WIFIA. WIFIA right now has an interest rate of about 4.95%. If you remember from the prior slide, a tax exempt draw that we can take in today's market has an interest rate of about 3.55%. So we're saving almost 1.5% or 150 basis points by using the revolving line of credit. Fully drawn in today's market, that's an equivalent of about a $700,000 a year reduction in interest cost. The second is that the revolving line of credit versus when we issue bonds, and we issue bonds, we have to start paying interest on those bonds from day one. Whether or not we spend that money, we're paying interest. Revolving line of credit is slightly different. We're paying our commitment fee, but we're only paying that drawn rate on the amounts we've drawn. So that allows us to be a little bit more efficient with how we pay for construction projects with debt. The third would be that over the last 12 to 18 months, the WIFIA loans have been somewhat delayed. The feds have been re-reviewing projects, looking at them in more detail, and that's caused a delay in a lot of the WIFIA loan closings. And we've seen that to some extent with our loan. And so as we proceed with the WIFIA loan and going through the final stages, this revolving line of credit provides us more certainty so that if we do need borrowing, if we haven't closed the WIFIA loan, we have this available. And then the last benefit of the WIFIA loan, or I'm sorry, the interim line of revolving line of credit, is that it allows us to delay drawing on the WIFIA loan. The benefit of this is that the EPA is currently, and as in the past, granted borrowers the ability to refinance the WIFIA loan rate one time under certain assumptions, the most important of which being you haven't drawn on the WIFIA loan. So what that means is that to the extent taxable rates come down over the next year or so, we might have the opportunity to refire WIFIA loan rate from a 4.95%, which it would be currently, down to some potentially lower rate, which would lower our overall debt service cost. So those are the benefits. Now let's look at the considerations, because those are often even more important than the benefits. So the consideration with a revolving line of credit, it's a variable interest rate. The interest rate is going to track SOFR. SOFR resets daily. So to the extent that interest rates increase, our interest rates on the draws will also increase, but vice versa. If they decrease, we'll be paying a lower interest rate. In addition, we have to pay the commitment fee on undrawn amounts. So you can almost think of that as that's a cost that we will incur no matter what. And so that's an expense that we have to account for. And then the last consideration, this is one we spent a lot of time talking to our legal counsel about. One of the benefits of this interim financing facility is that even though long-term financing on the project would need to be taxable, which the WIFIA loan is taxable, tax counsel has actually looked at the project and said during construction, they would allow us to draw and pay for construction costs on a tax exempt basis, as long as we have paid off any of these draws in the facility before substantial completion of the project. So that's something that we and staff will be following very carefully to make sure that we meet that requirement so that we don't kind of get hit with any tax penalties at substantial completion of the project. But that is something that we're going to have to be monitoring very carefully over the next 3 to 4 years. And so with that, I will turn it back to Leanne, and I'm also happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question. The revolving line of credit, is it a credit line that as we pay it down or we pay it off, do we get to have that funds available to us again?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Members, any other questions?
I have a quick question. The facility expires in like July of 29. And what is the consideration if the project duration extends beyond the expiration date of the line of credit?
Oh, great question. So essentially, there's not really a concern, at least from my perspective, on if the project substantial completion does not occur before 2029, because our intent is that we will probably draw on the WIFIA loan before or at expiration to pay off the revolving line of credit.
Depending, it doesn't matter how much of the loan is outstanding, we'll take it and
Exactly,
pay it down with you.
exactly. Or if it's not WIFIA or bonds or some other means of long-term financing.
We'll find another credit facility for the end of the expiration date.
So there's two questions there. The first is you have two options at expiration. If you want to extend the revolving line of credit for another 3 years, you have the option to do that. But the other option is you can simply pay it all down and it will expire. It will go away. It'll be off your books. And so if we draw on the WIFIA loan or use debt to pay off the facility, more than likely we would just let it expire. But we always have the option of renewing it if it's been a useful tool.
And the revolving line allows for direct draw payment to the contractor monthly, so you can make monthly draws, or do you have to take it in chunks or?
You can make monthly draws, but it wouldn't go directly to the contractor.
Come through.
Exactly.
But essentially you're using the contractor's billing as a backup for your draw request. You're using that as the determinant factor.
I think what you're asking is, as expenditures are made,
Yes.
like as the contractors say, hey, there's $25 million we've incurred, we need payment for that. You could use the line of credit for that.
Okay. But not all credit facilities allow the flexibility of that kind of draw.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking, and the contractor will make monthly draws because that's how we bill. So that in all likelihood, we'll need an ability to make monthly draws on the line if that's the primary source of funds.
Got it. Yeah, with the project, we have a number of different sources of funds. There's some grant funding, impact fees, as well as just the debt we're using. And so this would really be to avoid drawing in the WIFIA loan. And so the timing of when we would have drawn the WIFIA loan, that's something that working with staff, the team will make a decision on, okay, when a payment comes in, how do we want to pay for that? But yeah, your point is well noted, a consideration.
Thank you.
A follow-on question to that, with the 3-year facility expiration, do you have to sign up for another 3 years, or can it be year by year, like an extension of 1 year?
At expiration, we do have the option of, typically what we do is we'll go to the bank and say, hey, we want to extend, can you give us pricing for 1, 2, 3,
Gotcha.
4, and 5 years?
Okay.
And it's really just a call of, there's different
Best
costs
deal.
for each. And it's also a question of, staff time. Do we want to renew a facility every year and everything that comes along with that?
Okay, thanks.
I have a question about the tax exempt portion of this. Can you just help me understand why we have the two choices with this instrument?
Absolutely. And just to state the obvious, I am not a lawyer, so. But
Copy.
in talking,
Me either.
what's that?
Me as well. I'm not a lawyer either, but
Oh, perfect. We're on the same page then. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, in talking to tax counsel about this, kind of what you were getting at with your question, I believe, was we have the ability to draw tax exempt and the ability to draw taxable. Why do we need both of those? And so the tax exempt portion, tax counsels advised us that during construction, because of the manner in which whose obligation those capital costs are, we're able to pay for that on a tax exempt basis. However, once the project reaches substantial completion, we would no longer be able to fund on a tax exempt basis because of some of the components of the design build contract. And so the reason that we have the tax exempt and the taxable elements to this is because we want to make sure that if we reach substantial completion sooner than we thought we would, that at worst, we could draw on the taxable line of credit to pay off the tax exempt so that we don't get hit with a tax penalty. It's kind of like a backstop for us, if you will.
Got it. Thank you. Members, are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none,
Yeah,
I will.
sorry, real quick
Go ahead.
question, question I thought
Sure.
about, but the nature of the taxable versus not non-tax is because of the design build nature of the contract.
There's elements within it, and this is where it's gonna get outside of my lane. What we can do is we can get you a specific answer from tax counsel, if that's helpful, but there are elements as they reviewed the contract to where it wouldn't allow for tax exempt financing after a certain point in time. So that's where it would have to be taxable. But the WIFIA loan is a taxable loan. It's just at a subsidized rate. So that's why there's no issues with that, because we're funding long-term with a taxable product WIFIA.
The only reason I ask is because we're also saying these funds could be used for other projects. We're saying that it's not exclusive to the DSAP plan.
Correct. So if you use the revolving line of credit for other projects, tax counsel would make a determination based on.
Whether it's taxable or not taxable.
Exactly.
Depending on the nature of that project.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is
Second.
it seconded? Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Panachiro,
Aye.
Board Member Nance Bohan,
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Lopona,
Aye.
Board Member Terry Chan,
Aye.
Board Member Gina Bano, and Chair Nale Anthony.
Aye.
Chair, motion passes with 6 ayes.
Thank you so much. Please note for the record. Okay, now we're moving on to our items for information. We have 5 items. Number 1, the update on the Board of Water Supply's response to the potential impacts of the Red Hill fuel contamination. Chair recognizes Joyce Lay. Hello.
Good afternoon, the chair, members, and Joyce Lee with the manager's office. This is the June 2026 record update. Last week, Manager Law and I attended a community engagement in Honolulu, providing an update on monitoring wells in the area. But here's an updated well network map. All the blue dots and triangles represent BWS monitoring wells in various phases and BWS drinking water sources. Everything in red dot and red triangle are Navy operated and owned. So as of right now, we have approximately a handful of BWS monitoring well completed. In the far left corner with the blue arrow, you'll notice that, yep, right there. That is the monitoring well that we talked about last month, monitoring well 16 that we're seeking the Navy to include into the monitoring well network to expand their PFAS testing. Slide, please. So just a quick update. This past year, we were able to complete 5 new monitoring wells. The monitoring well looks like, that's a photo of what a monitoring well looks like. We have currently 1 monitoring well in construction, and we have 3 monitoring wells in procurement process. Monitoring wells undergo bi-weekly sampling as of right now, especially with the newly constructed monitoring wells, to create a baseline understanding of what the water chemistry is like underground, and all the test data is available on our website. Quick update on the exploratory wells. We have 2 currently in construction. IF 497, this one has been ongoing and construction continues. The photo on the left is an image of what the IF 497 exploratory well construction site looks like right now. Newtown 550, that one is still going through the initial construction permitting phase. We just received the well construction and pump installation permit recently, so hopefully that can proceed forward as soon as possible. And with exploratory wells, they are exploratory in nature, so once they are completed,
we will undergo, they will undergo what we call the pumping test to see if they're sustainable and will be a viable source for a permanent drinking water source. Updates from the Navy Closure Task Force, they are moving forward and continuing their tank cleaning process. A lot of their tanks have trenched into phase 4, which is cleaning, pressure washing, and then they're also almost done with the pipe cleaning, so they would be moving forward to have the pipes removed shortly. And this concludes my update for Red Hill. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Joyce. Members, any questions? Okay, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate the update. Moving on to item for information. Oh, thank you. We do have one testimony today on this issue. Joy, do we have Susan in the room?
Yes, we do, Chair, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Susan, thank you for joining us.
Long time, no see.
It's been a little while. It's good to see
It's
you.
been a while. I've seen new members. And congratulations to Lance and John for accepting your roles,
Thank you.
continuing your role. I'm Susan Pacola Davis. I only wanted to make a few comments because of Joyce's great presentation. But as far as the map, I would like to see the wells numbered. I had brought this up at the Restoration Advisory Board and they did that, and it helps when people start actually conversing about the wells. And maybe somebody can answer what the different sites identified. And then a very good tool on that map was the distance measure. So if we can use the distance measure and plot it on the BWS wells that are closest to the shaft and the Navy IAEA Halava shaft, so that when the public looks at it, they will understand the distance from those two. Because you can put the distance marker on there, but it's better just to have lines drawn and have it on there. So public like me, hopefully other people looking at your maps, they will see the distance between the two. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And it sounds like we've had various versions of this map go by, and we keep adding information to it. I really like the suggestion about numbering the wells. I know they are numbered, but they're just not numbered on the map. And maybe the request to staff would be to have us build something as a web tool that has multiple layers on it, so you can click them on and off, because it'll get pretty confusing if we have everything turned on. But certainly the distances as well as the well numbering is important. So I appreciate the comment and thank you for coming in, Susan. Members, any other comments or questions for Susan? Okay. Moving on to item number 2, a briefing on the clinical follow-up and care for those impacted by the JP5 releases at Red Hill, a consensus study report by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Chair recognizes Elizabeth Boyle. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Boyle. I don't believe that I've ever briefed the Board of Water Supply before, but I've met Ernie and several staff at different points in time while this study was ongoing. So this report actually released a couple of months ago, and so I'll try to skim through some of the parts that are just background that I think you will definitely already know, everyone in this room, but then and then I'll try to move quickly, especially through the background stuff, and let you ask any questions that you may have. Okay, so this is the esteemed committee and authors of this report. I could not have done this without them, and particularly the chair, Grace Lee, who's a pediatrician at Stanford, and then also I want to note the committee is made up of various different types of expertise. And we had 4 members of from that live on Oahu: Marcus Awane, Jairus Hedges, who's the retired dean of the medical school, Kiave Kahulakula, and Papa Rick, or Dr. Rick Custodio, who's at West Oahu. And then also, I couldn't have done this project without my staff team there. Just want to acknowledge them. And then also more acknowledgements. We had a liaison group, which Ernie Lau participated in, and so did many people that were impacted by the water contamination when it occurred in 2021. And then we can skip this one with the timeline of events, but that's just a timeline as the committee saw them, of major events that help you interpret some of the committee's recommendations. So, there was an initial fuel transfer error that happened in May of 2021 that started the spill. Then on November 2021, the vehicle strike burst the pipe, and then the water was all cleaned up in March of 2022. And then the bulk fuel was finally removed from the underground storage tanks in March of 2024. And then you guys are really aware of the physical context of the aquifer, so you can go on to the next slide. And the same, you can go to the next slide. Those are kind of more for the general public. And then I learned a lot of this from we're talking to Ernie and for others living in Oahu, that the importance of the social context of the water contamination. In the US, clean drinking water is legally protected by the Safe Drinking Water Act. And on military installations, federal law requires that housing is safe and protective of health. And in Hawaii, by or fresh water is a source of life and cultural responsibility. And the contamination raised ecological, cultural, and institutional trust concerns amid the complex history of Hawaii and the longstanding military presence. And so this study was conducted because this was the first large-scale contamination of a public drinking water system with jet fuel, and the exposure was multi-route, which was interesting or unique. It could have occurred through ingestion, inhalation, and dermal contact, and the event disrupted daily life and raised acute and long-term health concerns for tens of thousands of people. And so for all of those reasons, the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Defense Health Agency sponsored this study from the National Academies. And I wanted to note one thing about sponsorship of reports is that the sponsors of national, we work independently from our study sponsors, and the sponsors don't receive the report. So they work with us to develop the charge that I'll describe next, but they receive the report 10 days before it's released to the public. And they're not allowed to suggest changes to recommendations or anything like that. So once it's released to the public, we can make copy edits and some other little things like that, but then nothing else can be changed. It's part of our congressional charter that we work independently from the agencies that ask for our advice. And so the statement of task or scope of work that's in our contract with the federal government to carry out this study, our goal was to review the health risks associated with JP5 exposures from the releases in 2021 and to make recommendations to the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Defense Health Agency regarding the clinical follow-up for those who were exposed. So the first thing that they asked us to do in order to make that advice was to engage with the exposed community members to understand health issues and experiences, determine the strength of evidence for the putative health effects of JP5 exposure based on a review of the scientific evidence. They also asked us to review the existing clinical guidances for health risks that are associated with JP5 exposure and consider the harms and benefits of increased clinical follow-up for patients. They asked us to review available exposure assessments to determine how exposure estimates could inform patient clinical follow-up and care, and then putting all of that together, provide recommendations on how to improve patient follow-up and care and identify research needs to better support those who were exposed at Red Hill. And the committee's approach to the evidence review and engagement. So we reviewed epidemiologic studies and we leveraged systematic reviews that had been on that were completed early before the or like recently before the study was done. And then we assessed exposure data provided by federal and state agencies. We evaluated other existing clinical guidance standards from federal agencies, U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, American Pediatrics, those type of organizations. And then we deliberated in closed session, so in private meetings, to assess the strength of evidence for the putative health effects of exposure to jet fuel and other of the evidence that the committee needed to weigh. And then another important part of our project was engaging with the communities impacted or exposed to the JP5 releases through different listening sessions, community meetings, and we allowed other people to provide input at public meetings. And then we also had site visits to the Red Hill facility and the Waihe'e Tunnel, which we were very happy that Board of Water Supply staff arranged for us. And that was really important to the committee, particularly the tunnel visit was really important to the committee, particularly because, as I mentioned, some of the committee members are engineers and some of the committee members are doctors. So a lot of people don't really know how water is made clean. And then people don't know a lot of things about the infrastructure in Hawaii and that all of those things that were really unique. And then those two site visits were both on the same day, about a year ago. It was like almost exactly a year from today. That it is one of the most impactful things as part of this study. So just huge thanks to you guys for arranging that. Next slide. And then our approach to making recommendations really was aligned with the statement of tasks. So we engaged with the communities. And then we applied the core public health functions to the Red Hill response. And then we developed a framework for decision making, which I'll show on the next slide. And then we characterized the exposures. We reviewed the scientific evidence on the health risks of JP5. We reviewed any existing clinical guidances, and then using all of that information, made our recommendations. The next slide will show our a framework for decision making, or our principles that were used. And so here you have English language, medical and public health principles that are commonly used in making recommendations for public health interventions. And then as we were working on this English language, medical and public health principles framework, some of the committee members realized that there's a lot of alignment with Hawaiian cultural values. And so we have kind of a parallel framework, although that each value doesn't go one-to-one with the English language, but there's the kind of a complementary and overlapping framework for Hawaiian cultural values, which so that's that. And then here we'll go to the primary conclusions and recommendations. You can go to the next slide. And so from our evaluation of the exposure data, the committee found evidence of drinking water contamination prior to November 2021, suggesting that there were low levels of exposures that could have occurred prior to the November 20th release. But they believed that the peak exposure occurred between November 20th and December 3rd, 2021, when the shafts were taken offline. And then actions such as shutting down the wells, flushing the distribution system, and the household plumbing, and defueling the facility reduced exposures and help protect public health. And then we also found that there were some limitations in the sampling methods. There was a reliance on odor to guide advisories. And then there was also, I mean, and this isn't a fault of anyone, it just is how it exists, but there's an absence of specific biomarkers, which made it difficult to fully characterize exposures. Because just noting that the committee's goal was really to understand it at the individual or even at worst case, the household level. So we needed that a lot of granularity to really characterize the exposures to know what your exposure level is and how it differs from someone else's and how that could be influencing your clinical care. And then experimental evidence that from studies done by Hawaii Department of Health. I'm sure you're familiar with the exposure assessment that Hawaii Department of Health did, but their experimental study suggested that contamination levels were plausibly high enough to exceed safety factors for the chemical components of jet fuel. And so we have to rely on that because there weren't samples that were taken at the peak period of exposure that fully characterized all the contaminants. And so this is about the evidence of health effects of jet fuel. And so our review approach considered all the epidemiologic evidence in the Red Hill community, and also studies that were identified in systematic reviews that had been conducted on the health effects of jet fuel. And so I want to acknowledge that we leveraged the work done by others here, because the VA, prior to our project starting, the VA had published a systematic review that was looking at they were mandated by Congress to do it, but a systematic review to look at the health impacts of jet fuels in the occupational populations. And then at a few months later, the Red Hill Registry published a systematic review. Well, first it was a preprint, and then it got published around the same time, peer-reviewed, published around the same time as our report. But they did a systematic review that identified, any other route or source of exposure. And then they looked at all the populations that were excluded from the VA's review. So children and other types of populations that wouldn't be exposed to jet fuel occupationally. So these two other research groups had identified all of the human evidence on exposure to jet fuel. So the committee then took all of their evidence that they identified and reviewed it themselves too. And the common limitations across all of the studies are low response rates that leading to a potential for selection bias, a lack of empirical exposure measurement, a potential exposure misclassification, a reliance on self-reported systems or administrative coding. And then the two systematic reviews that we found were judged to have a low risk of bias, and we had high confidence in them because of their low risk of bias. But the individual studies within those reviews were all of low confidence. So the committee used an approach to synthesize the evidence that's been used by many of the studies that we've done for the VA. We have a whole series of work that we do weighing evidence for like Gulf War exposures, burn pits, the oil well fires that happened in the first Gulf War, and then also and other exposures in that war, and then but also a long-term history of using a certain framework for Agent Orange exposures. And then here's the results of our review. And so these are the categories of association that we've used in our reports for the VA. And so the strongest category of association that we use is sufficient evidence of an association. And so we had no outcomes that were identified as sufficient evidence of an association. And sort of the next level of evidence is limited or suggestive evidence of an association. And so there we found acute respiratory symptoms, skin, gastrointestinal, and mental health symptoms. So all of those are acute outcomes. And then for everything else, the committee deemed it to be inadequate or insufficient evidence to determine an association. But you should note that we didn't find anything that where there was limited or suggestive evidence of no association. So there's a big difference between no association, and inadequate or insufficient evidence to determine that there is an association. So the gray category basically means that either all the evidence kind of disagrees with each other, or in this case, it's really that there's really a lack of evidence. And then that blue category on the bottom there is like that we have seen evidence that something is not harmful. And so that is not what that's not the case here. That's not what our finding is. I just want to be really clear about that, because often people get those two things confused. And then just another note about the evidence review is that in environmental studies, this is these making these sort of causal, a high weight of evidence conclusions is really difficult and requires a lot of good human studies. And usually those need to be also validated by animal studies, because animal studies can be done experimentally, whereas human studies are observational. So this is not uncommon for these types of findings to happen from these kind of reviews. Anyway, but so now to the clinical implications, the committee didn't find any long-term clinical guidance that currently exists for the health effects of exposure to jet fuel. The exposure characterization is limited, and there weren't any validated biomarkers. So the committee determined that care should emphasize careful symptom documentation and continuity of primary care, and clear, culturally responsive, and trust-centered communication between clinicians and patients is essential as the evidence is evolving. And now we're going to the recommendations. So the core public health functions. So these come from a report from part of the National Academies is the National Academy of Medicine, which used to be called the Institute of Medicine. And so this is one of our reports from 1988, which determined 3 public health functions: assurance, policy development, and assessment. And those are the functions that are carried out to protect public health, which is defined by the Institute of Medicine in that report as what we do as a society to collectively assure that the conditions in which people can be healthy. And so the committee organized all of our recommendations under these public health functions in ways that support the exposed population, would strengthen clinical and public health protections, and improve the evidence base for understanding exposure and its consequences to aid long-term recovery and resilience. And so this is the crux of the report and our primary recommendation, and that is that clinicians should focus on symptom evaluation and continuity of primary care, and follow the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force guidelines and the Bright Futures recommendations. So U.S. Preventive Services Task Force is the guiding agency that makes recommendations for preventive services for adults, and then Bright Futures is from the Academy of Pediatrics, and that's for children. So we recommend that people follow that standard of care for everyone who was exposed at Red Hill. And then we also recommended that the Defense Health Agency, the VA, and community partners should work together to jointly develop and disseminate a Red Hill clinical guidance. And then the guidance, we also recommended that guidance should be periodically updated with input from the exposed or affected individuals and clinicians that are caring for those individuals. And then under assurance, our first recommendation there was that key partners should continue to mitigate exposure and reassure the public about the safety of the drinking water, which I know all of you are working to make sure people understand that their water is safe and ensure that it's safe. So in that we say to work collaboratively in transparency, continuing drinking water monitoring, and improving where you can compound specific chemical analysis, and then follow through on recommendations from the prior oversight and accountability reviews. And so for for that, we're talking about the OIG reports and the GAO reports and things like that, to making sure that the Navy and others that are maintaining that water supply follow through on all of those recommendations where they still apply. Some of them don't anymore. And then jointly identify and apply lessons learned so that you can strengthen preparedness for future events. So the policy development, in that area, we didn't necessarily have any recommendations, but here we point out some kind of key findings, or conclusions kind of, but policy development. So that's where you translate findings from assessment into coordinated public health and clinical action. And so, we're during our community meetings, we heard a lot of lessons learned from Red Hill. And those include the need to define clear roles and communication protocols across agencies. I mean, and I understand this was a terrible time to be responding to another public health crisis because it was on top of the pandemic. So I'm very sympathetic to everyone that was involved in this response. But defining clear roles and communication protocols is one of the things we kept hearing about, is that communication being very confusing, and then sometimes agencies not all saying the same thing. Ensure rapid action when contamination is identified. Standardize approaches to exposure characterization. Integrate physical and mental health guidance in response plans. Leverage existing federal and state emergency response frameworks. And consider the financial impacts to affected families, and also include scientific and community review and any emergency response planning. And so more from assessment about improving assessment, it talks about improving the exposure characterization. And so we had 3 recommendations in that area. And so that's recommendation 3 is to develop and validate biomarkers. And so that we called upon the CDC, the NIH, the Department of Defense, and the VA to support research to develop and validate biomarkers of petroleum associated with jet fuel. Recommendation 4 is to standardize environmental sampling. And so we said the EPA and CDC should develop standardized environmental sampling and chemical analysis methods for petroleum contaminated drinking water. And then recommendation 5 is to characterize the fate and transport of the chemicals and water systems, of petroleum chemicals and water systems. And so that's to support research to characterize how petroleum constituents move through drinking water sources to the points of use, including the evaluation of reactions with disinfectants and their behavior in plumbing systems. And so one of the reasons the committee recommended understanding more about the fate and transport is that they believe that some of those experiments could help inform our understanding of how the exposures occurred at Red Hill. And then assessment, also we made recommendations under that area for longitudinal health research. And so recommendation 6 was for longitudinal community engaged research. So we said that federal and state partners should support longitudinal community engaged research on the health effects of exposure to petroleum hydrocarbons associated with jet fuels. And we said that there's 3 areas of priorities that we recommended. And so the first being high quality epidemiologic studies. The second, toxicological studies reflecting real world exposures and effective use of health data systems. So that's where you're linking electronic health records with other registries. And then we also, for assessment, we recommended that the Defense Occupational Environmental Health Readiness System Registry, which is a program that documents the occupational and environmental exposures for service members. We recommended that is maintained, and so that stays in people's medical records that they were exposed at Red Hill, and then so that can be linked if if they were a member of the military, then it can be linked with their VA health record through the individual longitudinal exposure record system. And then we also recommended that there's expanded eligibility indoors so that all individuals who lived or worked on the contaminated system from May of 2021 to March of 2018 are considered potentially exposed. And so that's an expansion of what already exists because it was at the time of our report, it was starting at November 2021, November 20th, 2021.
Elizabeth,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, this is Ernie. Is that March of 2022?
Yeah.
Uh,
Did I say the wrong thing? Yes.
I think you said 2018, but
I don't
22
know
is
why I said
22.
that. Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
no,
It's late.
sorry.
It's late here on the East Coast.
Thank you.
Sorry for misspeaking. Yes. What it says on the slide is what's right, not what came out of my mouth. And then, oh, this is my last slide, but the Red Hill fuel releases were a defining environmental health event for Hawaii and the nation. And, you know, from this event really showed how water safety, public trust, and institutional integrity are all intertwined. And I mean, I think you guys well know that recovery from this requires transparency, coordination, and sustained investment in your drinking water systems. And those should be guided by your Hawaiian values of aloha, pono, kuleana, and I'm going to butcher the Hawaiian words, malama, ayana, and this is really an opportunity now to strengthen preparedness and stewardship of Hawaii's VI and support the recovery of communities impacted by Red Hill. And then there's a couple other slides now, but they're mostly administrative. So the report was released on March 19th at 2. And then the last slide is other reports that might be of interest. Oh, I forgot. There's a timeline of when we came in, then there's other reports of interest. Just to related to environmental health or military exposures that we're working on here at the National Academies. So thanks.
Oh, thank you for
Yeah.
zooming in today and making the presentation. Members, do you have any questions?
Chair, I just want to first of all thank everyone involved in putting the report together, and make sure that I say that my lack of questions is not because I don't think it's super important or really amazing study. I think just so much information that requires absorption that I'd like to leave open the possibility that some other questions could be put together in some format that might be a little bit more
Sure.
comprehensive. Just my initial reaction, to the presentation.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar as well. That I'd like to see whether or not we can get some staff members to come around and collect some questions that we could get to you in writing. I think one of the, and I see Ernie's hand up, but if I could just make a comment, maybe not a question, that one of the most important pieces here for us is to understand how, and within one of those last slides, how we as the Board of Water Supply can tighten up how quickly we can move information and in protecting the public health when these kinds of crises occur. Adding that this wasn't on our system, this was on the Navy system, but certainly the impacts on the trust as to whether or not water is potable, and what to do for people who are affected, and the question asking around that needs to get tightened up so that there's a clear set of tools available to us for all of us who provide water publicly to be able to move much quicker than we did in 2021. And so this is a really important piece of the puzzle as we as we move forward in that regard. So thank you, and please thank the committee for making as much time available as they did to build out this report.
Oh, you're very welcome. When everyone on the project loved working on this project, and that, it was really, it felt really important, and there was a community of people that was really interested in what the report had to say, and then just all of you were so easy to work with, and that was just really special. Ernie, I think you had a comment.
Yes, I would just like to thank you, Elizabeth, and Dr. Lee and the whole team. This is the first time I've actually participated in this process, and I was really impressed. They were willing to learn and to listen to the community and others about this. And they had a good visit to the Red Hill facility, including, I think, Elizabeth, you went to the lower access tunnel, not the upper access tunnel.
No, only the upper. We saw
Only the
like the
upper.
places that they would take a senator, but that kind of, it was very clean, but you could still smell the fuel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just
We
want to
did
say
have
it's
a very
been,
large group, so it was very difficult, I think, and the Navy worked hard to make sure that we could see it, because we had 9 staff, and my committee was 16, so I think we had 25 people that came to visit. So, it was difficult, I guess, to get a group that large in there.
well, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Mahalo, Elizabeth. It's been a real pleasure, and your work is very important. And I hope that the regulators take to heart the recommendations and the Department of War of this report. Thank you
I
so
hope
much.
so too.
Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much, and I think we'll probably follow up in writing with questions if we have any. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. And I'll say, I know that Ernie and his staff have read the report in detail, so you guys can all talk about what to say if you want. But thank you so much. Is it okay if I leave the Zoom now? Okay. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, aloha.
Aloha.
Yeah, aloha. Thank you so much for inviting
Thank
me.
you.
We're moving on to item for information number 3, water system revenue compliance with rate covenant. Chair recognizes Leanne Matsumoto. Aloha and welcome back.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and members. In accordance with Article 8, Section 8.02, rates and charges of the Water System Revenue Bonds Resolution number 717/2001, we have completed a review of the financial condition of the Board of Water Supply for the purpose of estimating whether the net revenues for the current fiscal year and the next succeeding fiscal year will be sufficient to comply with the rate covenant in Section 8.02. Our review included an examination of the financial and accounting records, which we considered necessary to express an opinion on the adequacy of the department's rates and other charges, such that the net revenue shall not be less than the net revenue requirement in each fiscal year. In our opinion, net revenues for fiscal years 26 and 27 will not be less than the net revenue requirement for those fiscal years. On the next page is the net revenue requirement calculation for 2026. Again, this is an estimate. It may change after our audited financial statements. We have an estimated total revenues of 349.9 million. Total deductions less the depreciation of 184.2, with a net revenue of 165.7. Our aggregate debt service is at 31.5, and at 1.2 times that, we have a net revenue requirement of 37.9 million. Our targeted, based off of our financial policy, Board of Water financial policy, we target 1.7 times, which requires us 53.6 million. Currently, we have a current ratio of 5.25. estimated for fiscal year 26. For 27, fiscal year 27, based off of the adopted budget, total revenues of 355.6 million, total deductions of 268.3, with net revenues of 87.3. Our aggregate debt service will be 31.5 million. Therefore, our net revenue requirement is 37.8 million. Our targeted net revenue requirement of 1.7 times is 53.6 million. Therefore, we estimate the ratio for fiscal year 27 to be at 2.77. Does anybody have questions? Thank
Members,
you.
any questions?
Just, why do you multiply it by 1.2? That,
1.2 is the bond covenant,
oh,
so that's the requirement, but for financial policy is 1.7.
mhm, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne.
Quick question to, since I was just looking at, but, in the current fiscal year, you account for depreciation in the calculation of net revenue, but you don't on a projected basis. Is there a reason for that?
We did deduct, my apologies, we did deduct depreciation from that calculation.
Oh, from the, well,
Operating
for
expense,
the
yeah.
2027?
Yeah,
Oh, it's just not shown on.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
I'll be sure to show that next time.
Oh, okay. So you actually do it the same way,
Yes.
forward looking as current. I got you. Okay, thank you. Just trying to demonstrate to the chair that I actually read the material. Sometimes I'm not sure he believes that I do.
Pass the test, yeah.
Thanks for catching that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance, for reading the material ahead of time and for the detailed questions. We appreciate that. Taking the fiduciary responsibility to the next level. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 4, status update of groundwater levels at all index stations. Chair recognizes Barry Usagawa. Aloha, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members, and congratulations and thank you for your services. We have for me, one aquifer index station in low groundwater condition. That's common key and caution. The monthly production was low, still 130.5 million gallons per day. The rainfall index for May was 202%. And the 5-month moving average at 195%. The no drought conditions on the drought monitor for Oahu. The National Weather Service is forecasting above normal precipitation through September, so this should go on. Not sure when the El Nino will hit, but perhaps after that. All monitor wells exhibited increasing head levels. And from the higher rainfall with the past several months. The production in May of this year is lower than May of last year and close to the 5-year monthly average. And so my short version of this graph is that if the squiggly line is above the red line, we're in good shape, which is the 5-month moving average. And then the production, in blue is lower than the green and the gray. So relatively, they're in good shape so far. Thank you very much. Available for any questions?
Barry, maybe one from me. What do you expect out of this heightened El Nino? And how does that play into just this overall view plane where you sit at in terms of both production as well as the long-term averages?
Warmer temperatures in the Eastern Pacific may generate more tropical cyclones, so we may see more hurricane activity. Increased temperatures increases the chance of droughts, higher demand, less rainfall. The higher any rainfall that we'll probably get in the fall would be because of those passing storms. But usually El Nino will result in lower rainfall and higher temperatures.
Okay.
Chair, if I could add to Barry, thanks, Barry. Also with the increased rainfall is increased vegetation and fuels. So with the drying, if the summers get really dry and we get into drought again, it could be a heightened risk of wildfire. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Barry. Thank you for your time. Okay, folks, we're moving on to item number 5, water main repair report for May 2026. Chair recognizes Daniel Lee. Daniel, before you get started, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the factory tour that you gave me the other week at the appreciation event for all of our crews. Daniel took me behind the scenes, and I got to see like all kinds of pipe fixing things that I could not have even imagined, and it just gives me a deeper appreciation for how hard the staff works in these emergency situations. So I just want to thank you for doing that.
You're welcome, Chair. Right, good afternoon, board and members. I'm Daniel B., Acting Assistant Program Administrator for Field Operations. I have the water main and leak detection reports for the month of May. We had 35 main breaks, 11 were leaks, 24 were breaks, and there's damages. For our leak detection report, we had 43 points of interest, found 39 leaks, 4 main leaks, 28 were meter coupling leaks, 7 leaks on the customer side, and no service leaks. Are there any questions?
Members, any questions? Okay, Daniel, thank you so much for your time today. Okay, that brings us to the end of our regular meeting. Are there any items that we forgot to discuss or anything that needs to come up? Okay, hearing none, what I'd like to do is I'd like to entertain the motion for a 5-minute break while we reset the room and reset the Zoom to go into executive session. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in
Thank you.
favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we're just going to take a 5-minute break to reset. You can go ahead and gavel us out, John.
So move.
Thank you. It's been
Second.
moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, let's go ahead and move into executive session. So we are in regular session. I want to take a second to thank staff, especially for all the hard work, for the board, for this long-ish meeting, and for council to help us get some clarification on some of these matters. So for executive session, item number 1, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. And is it seconded?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Conachero,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Wilhelm,
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Lopolo,
Aye.
Board Member Terry Chen,
Aye.
Board Member Gina Albano,
Aye.
and Chair Nolly Anthony.
Aye.
Chair motion passes with 6 ayes.
Thank you so much. So please note for the record, minutes have been approved. Item number 2, is there a motion to approve staff's recommended settlement amount for civil number 1 CCV -20-0001553 Property Holdings LLC v. City and County of Honolulu Board of Water Supply, HRS 92-5 Alpha Sub 4.
Hey, Lehu,
Yes.
your proposed settlement of civil number is different from our we have 1 CCV -20-00000846. You have 115.
Yeah, the number is different.
Well, okay. I'm looking at the script document, but let me see if I can salvage this and go into the board packet. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second here. I think I had that.
So the notice and agenda, is wrong.
The notice and agenda is wrong.
846.
The letter I got after it was posted is wrong.
That should be 410. When he first said,
This is the letter.
I never wanna. I know, I was thinking, you wanna be like you.
It's important to get these things right. Hang on.
I got.
I was thinking, you got the wrong
Okay.
page it was. Yeah, that's what I had the wrong page. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have 0000846 on the board packet. Is that the correct number, folks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
846.
What
Okay.
were you reading?
I'm going to reread this back into the record. I apologize. I was looking at the Word doc that helps me work through this complicated agenda here, and that number was different. But this in the
I was
board
gonna say,
packet,
it's right.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it back
Had
here.
the right stuff.
Yes,
Only
yes,
Lehu
yes.
had the wrong number.
This is the plan.
You know, yes, that is correct. So for item number 2, the motion at hand is
yeah,
to
it's-
approve staff's
Yeah.
recommendation to settle civil number 1 CCV 20-00000846 Property Holdings LLC v. City and County of Honolulu et al. Is there a motion to approve the settlement?
Yes.
Second.
I
Thank
make
you.
that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. I thank you. My compatriots here on this board. Please, roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Kaneshiro,
I,
Board Member Lance Wolhead.
Aye.
Board Member Jeffrey Lapola,
Aye.
Board Member Darian Chen.
Aye.
Board Member Gina Bano,
Abstain.
and Chair Nalehu Anthony.
Aye.
Chair, motion passes with 5 ayes and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. Please note for the record. Now, regarding numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, we're going to defer those back to staff to come back with some more information at a later date. No further board action is required. With the exception of one last thing, I ask of you all, is there a motion to adjourn?
You don't hesitate now. I make that motion.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, you can go ahead and gavel us out. And please mark the time at 12:04 Hawaii Standard Time. Thank you for your service today. It's a long 3-hour meeting. I appreciate you guys.
504.